Hi, my name is Russell Bowyer, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to increase hotel revenues. Your revenues will be affected by the type of hotel or accommodation that you have. Is it room-centric or is it restaurant/bar centric? Because there are some hotels out there that, well, they're not really hotels, they're more a restaurant cum bar that has rooms where guests can stay. Having said that, the concepts that I'm going to be talking to you about are exactly the same. For example, why is it that you can have some hotels that have, say, 67 bedrooms that have revenues of £250,000, and then you can get another hotel which has got 18 rooms and has revenues of £700,000? Of course, there are a number of things that impact on this. There's obviously occupancy rate, the amount you charge for your room, etc. So I'm going to turn the question on its head. So rather than say, well, how do I increase the revenues of my hotel? I'm going to be looking at the inputs that affect the revenues, because the revenue of your hotel is an output, it's an outcome. And the only way we can affect an outcome is to have a look at what inputs affect that outcome. So for example, if you were driving a car, depending on what speed you want to go at, the speed of that car is the outcome. So how much you press down on the accelerator, what fuel you put in the vehicle, whether it's diesel or petrol, the grade of fuel will affect the speed. What gear you're in will affect the speed. So what we're going to be looking at in this video is all of the inputs that affect the output, which in this case is your revenues, which ultimately, which is most important, will affect your profits. So I'm going to switch across now to a set of numbers which are laid out in front of us, which will be of a hotel. So I'm just going to switch across now. So what you have in front of you now is a set of numbers relating to a hotel business. The left-hand column is our current set of numbers and the right-hand column is our target. The top section in black and green represents our inputs, which is what we're going to be focusing on, and the bottom section, which is in blue, are our revenues or our output or our outcome that we are ultimately trying to affect. So let me just run through those numbers one by one. The first number that isn't any different in both columns, because that's our starting point, is our number of opening customers, which is currently 4,125. The next number is the average customer spend, or our average transaction value. Currently £67.40, and we're looking to target £75. The average amount customers spend is the average amount they spend with you each time they visit your hotel. And there are a number of things that we can do to increase that. Of course, the obvious one will be to put our prices up. But the other one is to get them to spend more while they're with you. So for example, if a big percentage of your customers aren't using your restaurant, assuming you have one, we can encourage them to do so. It may be that your offering isn't what your customers are seeking. So you could change that offering and encourage them then to start eating with you. It may be that you can offer incentives. So currently perhaps your customers are only having breakfast with you, but then you could offer evening meals and you can incentivize them to do so rather than go out and find a meal somewhere else. The following number that we're looking at here is the number of times customers return. Currently set at 2, and our target is 3. And there are a number of ways that you can achieve that. You can engage with your customers more often. And obviously, if you provide a better experience for them, then they're going to be coming to you more often. If you gather information from your customers, like events, anniversaries or birthdays, there's nothing to stop you reaching out to them to try and encourage them to come back to you more often. The following number relates to customers that never return. For whatever reason, they've chosen not to use your hotel again. It could be that we've upset somebody, or it could be that they no longer visit this particular area. But always remember, we can never please everybody all of the time. But one of the important messages that I want to express with all of these numbers, not just with the percentage of customers that never return, is that by having a metric or understanding what the percentage is or what the current number is, we can then manage that number and start to look at ways of affecting it, changing it and improving it. If we don't know what the number is or the percentage is, we don't know whether what we're doing is affecting it, whether it's improving or getting worse. So a good expression to refer to is what we measure, we can manage. The following number is our audience reach, or number of visitors to either our website, to our Facebook page, to TripAdvisor and so on. It's our audience reach of the people that potentially will be seeing our hotel. And presently that's 12,750. Our target is 17,750. And there are a number of ways that we can achieve that. So for example, on our website, we can perform a bit of SEO work. And SEO is search engine optimization. So we can improve how our website appears in the search engines. And that's something that you could get someone to do for you. You could improve your visibility on TripAdvisor by getting your customers to provide feedback or testimonials. The more feedback and the more testimonials, the more likely you are to get customer engagement and get more people viewing your page on TripAdvisor. The following number is your capture rate of those visitors. So what I mean by that is that, for example, the current number of visitors is 12,750, and of those, 0.8% of those are performing an action, whether it's picking up the phone or filling out an online form. We are looking to increase that to 1.2%. And again, there are ways to do that. So for example, if we're talking about your website, if you had your website redesigned to be more customer focused, making sure there's a call to action, you can affect the capture rate of your visitors. The last number that we're going to look at, which again is a percentage of the inputs that have an effect on the revenues, is the conversion rate of those visitors. So what I'm talking about here is that the 0.8% of 12,750, which is roughly 102 people, of those, 20% of those become customers, or roughly 20 people. And again, there are ways that we can affect that, because what we're looking to do is to target 40%. So it's how we engage with those people and what we do behind the scenes and what offering that we have will affect that conversion rate. We can then begin to start asking questions about how or what we need to do in order to achieve that target. And finally, all of the numbers and percentages in the left-hand column are what go to produce the revenue of £503,781. In the right-hand column are green numbers. At the bottom, we've got our revenues of a question mark. And of course, at this point in time, we don't know what that is. But in a minute, I'm going to be plugging all those numbers into a piece of software called Increased Profit Software. That will show the effect our targeted input numbers will have on our revenues, but more importantly, the effect it will have on our profits. So now that we have our current numbers and our target numbers, we can now begin to look at the effect they're going to have on our revenues. Now, whether your hotel has higher revenues than the example that I'm showing you here or lower, it doesn't matter. It's the principles behind what I'm explaining and demonstrating which is most important. And it's the concept of looking at the inputs that has a direct effect on the outcome or the outputs, in other words, the revenue. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to switch across to this software, which is Increased Profit Software. I've already populated the numbers which were in our left-hand column. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you by inputting the targeted numbers, the effect that they will have on the revenues. So I'm just going to switch across now to Increased Profit Software. So in front of you now is our Increased Profit Software. And all I've done at this point in time is to enter the numbers in that first column that we were just looking at a minute ago. So in the first cell, you'll see that the sales that we were talking about, or the revenues, of 503,781. There are two additional numbers that I had that relate to this hotel, and the first one is the cost of sales and the other one is your overheads. And that leaves us with a profit of 50,414. These numbers you should be able to get either from your management accounts if you prepare management accounts each month, or you can get them from your year-end accounts. So what you'll need to do is get a copy of your final accounts from your accountant as new as possible. So don't go back too far. You need to be working on the most recent set of data that you can. Then you'll see that I've entered in the number of opening customers, which in this case was 4,125, our average transaction value, or the average customer spend, which in this case was £67.40, the number of times customers return, which was 2, our current customers that never return, or our defection rate, of 13%, our current audience reach or visitors of 12,750, our visitor conversion, or the number of visitors that actually interact with us, pick up the phone or fill out an online form, which was 0.8%, and finally the conversion of those visitors into customers or into sales, and that was 20%. So now I'm going to just switch across to the working sheet, and then I'm going to start putting the numbers in that we found in the target column. So this is where I'm going to start looking at the effect that the targeted numbers ultimately will have on our revenues. So I'm going to jump down here, and the first number we had was the average customer spend, or average transaction value, and we were going to look to increase that to 75. The next number is the number of times customers return, and currently set at 2, we were looking to increase that to 3. Next was we were going to look at reducing the customer defection rate, or the number, or the percentage of customers that never return, from 13% down to 7.5%. Then we were going to look at our customer acquisition. So we start off with our audience reach, or number of visitors, currently 12,750, and we're looking to increase that to 17,750. Then we're going to look at the number of visitors that actually pick up the phone or fill out the online form, currently 0.8%, and we're going to look at to increase that marginally to 1.2%. The final number that we're going to be looking at here is that the number of those visitors that convert to customers or sales, currently set at 20%, and we're looking to increase that to 40%. So now I have two columns. I have my current inputs and I have my targeted or forecast inputs. So now I'd like to focus on the top part of the screen, and the first line relates to sales or revenues. In the left-hand column, or the current number, was 503,781. Now, based upon the targeted numbers, or the inputs that we've just changed, our turnover would end up being 894,375. Now that's an increase of 77.53%, or in amount terms, an increase of 390,594. The other number that I'd like to also show you is that the profit figure has gone from the original 50,414 that we showed on the original sheet, and that's jumped to 368,748. Now that's an increase of over 630%, and in number terms is just over £318,000. There is one more adjustment that I'm going to input here before I discuss what's actually happened there, and that relates to your overheads. Now, where you've got a business that revenues increase from £500,000 to just under £900,000, there's going to be an impact to your overheads. Some won't be affected. So, for example, if you rent your hotel, the rent won't change, assuming that what we're achieving here is to improve our occupancy rate, increase the number of customers that eat in our restaurant, increase our average transaction value and so on. Those would not have an impact on the cost of your rent if you're staying in the current hotel, or if you've got a loan, the interest costs relating to that loan, because you're staying in the same hotel. However, the costs that may be affected, because you've got increased business, you may require additional staff. Telephone costs are probably going to be going up, stationery, postage, and possibly your heating costs will increase. So there's going to be certain costs that will increase as a result of increasing your revenues in this way. And I'm going to suggest in this particular example, if I put in £100,000 in there, that's a fair number. But even if I do, your profits are still £268,000, which represents an increase of £218,000. So I'm hoping now you can see the benefit of focusing in on the individual inputs that directly affect the outcome, which in this case is your revenue and profits. So you end up with much more empowering questions. And let's have a look at that for a minute. So, is it feasible that I could increase the number of visitors from 12,750 to 17,750? Well, I would argue yes. By tweaking your website to improve its searchability on the likes of Google, by tweaking how you are seen on the likes of TripAdvisor with your customer reviews, you are going to gain more visitors as a result of that. So I would say that an increase of 5,000, bear in mind that's over 12 months, that's just over an extra 400 visitors per month, is very achievable. Let's have a look at the visitor lead conversion. So we've gone from 0.8% to 1.2%. Is that achievable? Absolutely. By redesigning your website or tweaking your existing website to make it more customer focused, to look at whether you've got a good call to action. Is it easy to find your contact details, your telephone number? Do you have an online form that people can complete? Is your website mobile friendly? Because more and more people are switching to using mobile phones. These are the type of things that will affect that conversion rate there. So I think that changing from 0.8% to 1.2% is very achievable. The next number that we looked at was our conversion of those visitors that have interacted with us or filled out a form or picked up the phone. Currently 20% and increasing that to 40%, we've doubled it. That's quite a big jump, but I would suggest that 20% is low, even probably 40% is low, and I think with a bit of tweaking about how the phone is answered, if you improve everything about your hotel and you explain your offering to people, they're more likely to want to engage with you. If you have better customer reviews and testimonials that support what you're saying, people will feel more confident to book your hotel. So there are things that you can do behind the scenes to increase your 20% conversion up to 40%. And I think that that's very manageable or achievable. And even if it's not, by having a higher target, by asking empowering questions like how could I achieve that, or what do I need to do in order to achieve that, you'll start to find ways or look for ways in order to achieve that. So as long as you're working towards improving the 20% and towards the 40%, that's what counts here. The next one was whether or not we could reduce our current customer defection rate from 13% down to 7.5%. Of course, there are ways that you can do that too. And I think it's very achievable to reduce our customer defections, or the customers that never return, by providing a much better experience for them, so your customers rave about you and your customers want to come back. You want to give customers a reason to return to your hotel. The next number, which in fact was the first number we looked at on the sheet, was the average transaction value. currently £67.40, and we've increased that by £7.60 to £75. Is that achievable? I would say yes, and I think that's probably quite conservative. And in a hotel's case, the average transaction value will be affected by your occupancy rate, the amount you're charging for the room, how much they spend when they're with you, whether they're having breakfast and/or evening meals. And there are a number of ways that you can achieve an increased average spend. And again, by asking empowering questions of how can I achieve that, you'll find ways of doing so. And in this case, and in particular, I would engage with your members of staff, but I also suggest you consider engaging with your customers too. Ask your customers what they would like you to provide. And there could be some little things or quick wins that you can quite easily offer to your customers, which would not only affect your average transaction value, but it might encourage them to come back again because they enjoy the experience, because you are providing them with what they want. The next number that we looked at was the number of times customers return. Currently they're coming to you twice a year, and we've looked to increase that to 3 times a year. And again, you can ask questions about how you can achieve that or what it is you need to do to accomplish that target. So for example, you could get the information from your customers of special dates, birthdays and anniversaries, for example, and you could then write to them to invite them back to you, whether they're local and they're coming just to eat at your restaurant, or whether they're further afield and they're staying in your hotel, and you could provide a lovely anniversary meal in your restaurant too. So there are all sorts of ways that you can encourage people to come back to you. And of course, as all of these work together, you improve your customer service, you improve your stay, you offer better things. Each one of these will affect the other. So of course people will want to come back to you, and your number of times customers return will automatically increase. So I hope that's been very useful to you, and I hope you can see or understand now the importance of changing the question that you're asking. So instead of asking the question of how do I increase the revenues of my hotel, you're asking more empowering questions of how do I affect the inputs that affect the outcome, or in this case, the revenues of your hotel. More often than not, when people use increased profit software and they set new targets, quite often they'll set conservative targets for each one of those numbers. And I do believe actually the numbers that I've put into this particular business are conservative. But more often than not, those targets get exceeded. They go beyond those targets, because what happens is that you get a snowballing effect. So you start asking questions of how to achieve that, or what do I need what do I need to do in order to achieve those new targets. And before you realize it, you start putting things in place, and each of the changes that you make impacts on the other input. So you get a snowballing effect. And this is what I call the power of leverage. So you're leveraging all of those inputs. So rather than look at or focus on one input, you're focusing on all of those inputs. And I think you could see when I was explaining it, each one can impact the other. So when you improve your hotel, you're more likely to get better testimonials or good feedback, which then would affect your conversion rate. You get a better conversion rate and you've got more people coming, so you can then look at increasing your average spend that customers spend with you, and so on. So as I say, I hope that's been useful to you. If you'd like to find out a bit more about increased profit software and how you can use this particular software to really focus and ask empowering questions, there's a link below to click on, and there is a bit of detail behind or below the video too that you can read. Thank you very much for listening. This has been Russell Bowyer of bowraven.com.